Hey guys, Otaku here. So this past weekend I got topped first place with Goaty. It's a deck that I've been working on for a long time since Goaty came out back in Power of the Elements and then more support in Darkwing Blast. And finally, I think I got it down to a T. I got a very good deck profile. Like I said, I topped first. I went against Runic Naturia. I went against Cash. I went against Drytron. And I went against Branded and Red Eyes Dark Dragoon Turbo. I went against a few really good decks. And this deck really just prevailed, came out on top. So yeah, we're going to just jump right into it. All right, so to start with the main deck, we're going to have 3 Paces, Light of the Goaty, 2 Shift, Fairy of the Goaty, and 2 Zep, Ruby of the Goaty. Now these are your tuners. Paces and Shift come back on the standby after they were banished, and then Zep comes back if he is banished on your opponent's turn. Realistically, I would say only run 1 Zep and 3 Shift. My issue is I just don't own 3 Shift. Haven't got my hands on a third copy. But the 2 and 2 still works very well. But you definitely want 3 of Paces because he's your best one. You summon him, he banishes himself for cost, and then you can special a fish from your hand, which comes in really handy for one of the cards we have later in the deck. But Zep being at 2, there's not really, it doesn't hurt, but he is your weakest of the tuners. It's just he gives you a lot of extension on your opponent's turn. But you can suffice with only the 1, especially since Goaty have a lot of recyclability in their deck. As for the rest of the Goaty monsters that we run 2 Exeep, Omen of the Goaty, and 1 Snopios, Shade of the Goaty. Exeep, mainly he's your search off your field spell, because the moment he comes to your hand and on resolution of the field spell, you can then activate his effect to special summon him from your hand if a fish is banished. And Snopios gives you a lot of play on your opponent's turn. He has that quick effect in your hand to banish 2 fish from your hand or graveyard to special summon him. And then if you banish, obviously, Zep, then you can summon Zep, and then you have the quick effect to synchro summon a level 8 on your opponent's turn, which comes in very handy. But also being able to target anything on the board when he's summoned, and when it leaves the field, it's banished. Very, very strong. Adds a lot of disruption, makes your opponent think about what they do and how they do it. And I tried running Enoch in the deck. Enoch just doesn't work. He doesn't have a lot of versatility. You just summon him, he brings back a monster, and then that's basically where that ends. I just did not have a lot of plays with that. So yeah, I also then run a small non-Goaty fish engine in the deck. I guess not small, but we run 2 Lifeless Leaf Fish. We mainly use him to get Shift in the Grave. If we don't start with a tuner in our hand, we can get Shift in the Grave, use Shift to banish himself from graveyard. We also have 3 Silent Anglers just for an extension. He is usually, if he's in our hand, he's the last thing we summon from our hand, seeing as his effect blocks me from special summoning from the hand for the rest of the turn. And then 1 Super Agent Deep Sea Kolakith, or however you pronounce his name. This card is actually cracked, and I managed to summon him twice this past weekend. He's really strong. We mainly use Paces to get him out on the board. He is not searchable unless we use Ice Barrier, which we're not using. But he is just very strong. I think he's a heavy brick since he's level 7. I think he's a heavy brick to have in your deck more than 1. He's more one of those cards that he's really good when you start him, and sometimes when you draw into him. But using Paces to use Paces effect, special summon him from hand, discard a card, summon 4 fish, and then just pop off from there. Very, very strong card, but very situational. That's why we run him at 1. I then also run the Supay engine in this deck. I would realistically be running 3 Supay Duskwalker, but I only have 2 copies right now. It's a hard card to find because not a lot of people opened up the Legendary Duelist stuff. So I do run 2 Supay Duskwalker and 1 Supay. You only need the 1 Supay. He's a brick. He's a garnet if you draw into him. But the regular Duskwalker, you just discard a card, special summon it from hand, special summon Supay from deck, and then there you go. You have a level 6 right there. Very, very strong. If for some reason you have Supay and you get him off the board via card effect, you can special summon this. It has then, I believe, 4,400 attack points that turn. Very, very strong. But that never came up during my duels. Like I said, I'd be running this at 3 because this is just extra extension if, say, you don't start a good hand, or you just need to get a bailout, bait out some hand traps, then this is very, very strong. But unfortunately I only have the 2, but the 2 worked just fine. And then to wrap up the monsters, I am running the Adventure Engine in this deck. So I have 3 Water Enchantress and 1 Wandering Griffin Rider. Enchantress, of course, is our search for Rite of Aramesir, and then Griffin is our Omni Negate. So that's basically where that ends. Water Enchantress is also a water monster, so it does help with if we want to summon out Angler, if we just start a really bad hand, or with a different card that's in our extra deck later on. And then as for hand traps, I am running 3 Ash Blossom and 3 Droll and Lockbird. Ash, best hand trap in the game, stops special summons from the deck, stops drawing, stops foolish burials, essentially. And then Droll is just really good for stopping draw power. I used Droll mainly on the Runic player. They activated Tip, I activated Droll. They literally couldn't play the rest of that duel. Because they just weren't able to draw all that much. They went into their Naturi engine, but it just wasn't enough. But Droll does stop a lot of other decks. It can stop Kashtira if you do it at the right choke point, especially if it's comboed with Ash Blossom. But 2 of the best hand traps in the game right now. And so, I mean, you can do without Droll. You can put him in the side deck. I just main deck him. I think he's a lot more versatile in the meta than a lot of people give him credit for right now. Then moving on to spells, like I said, I am running a Adventure Engine, so I do have 1 Rite of Aramesir, 1 Fateful Adventure, and 1 Dracoback. Obviously, a lot of people in the comments are probably saying run at least 2 rites. Most people would say run 3, but a lot of people would say at best, or at the worst case scenario, run 2. I only own 1. It's a very expensive card until it gets its reprint here fairly soon, but with Enchantress being able to recycle it from the graveyard, 1 has been enough. I have not at any point thought to myself, man, I wish I was running a second or third copy. Now, when I do get the second copy, I will be running 2, but 1 has been doing me just fine. So yeah, and then Fateful Adventure is our search for Griffin, and Dracoback, of course, is for a bounce back to the hand and just a little bit of protection. I then run 3 of the field spells. This card isn't like the best card in the deck by any means. There's a lot of better field spells in the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! But this card is just a bit of an extension. You can banish a fish from your hand or graveyard, search a fish. And like I said, 9 times out of 10, Exeep is your search. But there have been times where I don't need Exeep, or I've already got Exeep off that turn, so I search for something else. You can use this to search any of your Goaty monsters, so Snopios, your tuners, Exeep. Like I said, this is just a very strong card. And also, it can't be destroyed or banished if you control a Synchro Fish monster. So it's just very, very strong, and it definitely gives a presence if your opponent ignores it. Wrapping up the spells, I do run 1 Instant Fusion and 1 Ready Fusion. There are 2 fusion monsters in this extra deck that we will be getting to, that both these cards can target in the deck, or extra deck, and then summon them. So this is just extensions. Again, if we don't get a lot of plays, Goaty has a very limited arsenal of cards, so we have a lot of stuff in the deck that can back them up, and these are no exception. So since Ready Fusion is, of course, limited, we had to go with Ready Fusion. Both accomplish the same thing. Like I said, both monsters in the extra deck that these can summon, they both can summon. And then I only run 3 traps in the deck. I run 1 Infinite Impermanence and 2 Solemn Judgment. Realistically, I would normally be running 3 Impermanence, but I didn't have any extras, and so all of my Impermanence are in my other decks. And I didn't feel like swapping them out. But Solemn Judgment, of course, has still been getting the job done. Solemn Judgment is a very strong card. You gotta, of course, respect it. But if I could, I would swap out Solemn Judgment for 2 Impermanences to have 3 copies in general. Yeah, so let's move on to the extra deck. For the extra deck, we're going to start with the Goaty monsters. So we have 2 Ariapos, 2 Ascan, and 2 Goaty of the Deep Beyond. Ariapos is your only level 6 in this extra deck, unless you go and decide to swap out some of these cards with another level 6. I originally thought that I was going to need more level 6 cards because most of the Goaties are like level 4s and level 2s. The tuners are all level 2s, so I thought it was going to be an issue only having the 2 level 6s, but more times than not, I realized I was bypassing level 6, going straight to level 8, or sometimes even straight to level 10. But Ariapos, a lot of the times you're going to want to summon on your opponent's turn, so that way you can activate his effect to banish out Zep from your deck, and then Zep comes back because you banished him on your opponent's turn. Ascan is Minor Disruption, you summon him, banish out a Sconn and another one of your opponent's monsters, or one card on your opponent's board, and then because the Sconn got banished, he can banish a card from your graveyard, or banish a fish from your graveyard, and then a Sconn comes back. So you never actually lose a monster, you just banish one of your opponent's monsters. And then, of course, your boss monster is Ghoti of the Deep Beyond. You summon this on your opponent's turn, the whole board gets banished. Whole board gets wiped, and at the right choke point, that stops your opponent's turn right there. Stops it flat. This card came in clutch. I summoned this, I don't even know how many times this past weekend. And then on the following standby phase, after it gets banished, it comes back with 500 per banished monster. So this thing is very strong. It sets up a lot of OTKs. And like I said, it's just at the right choke point, this could be the best card in the deck. Or this could be the deciding factor of who wins the game. It's just very strong. As for the non-Ghoti Synchro monsters, we're going to start with the level 8s. We have Dragite for the Labyrinth and Runic duels. Summoned this on my turn to swing for game on a Runic player. They had one card in hand, had Fountain, and I was able to negate that one card in hand because it was a Runic spell card, and then I swung for game with all my monsters. They were not able to stop me there. I then have Draco Berserker of the Tenyi, just a very strong card, more disruption. You summon this out, opponent activates an effect, you banish it, and then of course you can do a really good OTK with this as well, because you can just summon it out, swing over your opponent's monster, and then swing again because it gets it gets the attack of the monster it just destroyed and can attack again. And then we of course have Accel Synchro Stardust Dragon and the Stardust Dragon itself. Accel Synchro Stardust Dragon. All of our Ghoti tuner monsters are level 2. So you summon this out, bring back the tuner that you just used to summon it, and then activate its quick effect to summon out Stardust Dragon, and then go into a level 10 for further plays. And then of course what you summon on the level 10s is debatable on the situation. There are moments where I was actually able to summon this because the Accel Synchro Stardust Dragon's effect actually counts as Stardust Dragon being synchro summoned. So there were times where I had another level 8 on the board, so I could keep my Stardust Dragon on the board for just that negation presence and go into a level 10 somewhere else. I believe I did that against Kashtira. It was just very, very strong. They were really just unable to do anything once I summoned this, so we're going to move on to the level 10s. For the level 10s, I run one Satellite Warrior. This is mainly here for the Accel Synchro Stardust Dragon combo. You summon out Accel Synchro Stardust Dragon, use its effect to summon out Stardust Dragon, and then you go into Satellite Warrior. Now, this is a synchro heavy deck, but if you start with that combo and you only have the Synchro Stardust Dragon and the Stardust Dragon in your graveyard, this card gives you 2 pops, and he gains 1,000 attack for each card he pops. His effect is basically when you summon, for every card for every synchro card in your graveyard, you can pop that many cards on your opponent's board, and you gain 1,000 attack per popped card. We then have the Ice Jade Gamir Adrian. I did not actually summon this at all this past weekend. It just didn't come up, even against the Kashtira player. However, I'm sure this will come out more once Cyberstorm Access comes out, which it might be out by the time I upload this video. But mainly because the monster that's coming out in that set can just turbo this card out instantly. So we'll just see. But like I said, this didn't come up, but it's a very strong card. It prevents your cards from being banished, and it can bring itself back pretty easily. And then, of course, I run a Baronne de Fleur, arguably the best staple, arguably the best, like, just generic level 10 synchro monster. You summon it, you have an Omni Negate, and then it can send itself back on the standby phase. I did this actually twice, where I summoned Baronne, sent him back in standby, because most of my plays actually take place during the standby. So bring back my tuners, bring back my boss monster, I can swap him out for a monster in my graveyard. Just very, very strong card to have, especially when, like I said, all my plays are in the standby phase. And then the last 2 are our instant fusion and ready fusion targets, the Alvain, the Essence of Vanity, and Rare Fish. Rare Fish is just a level 4 fish monster, which can help you go into like level 6 or even level 10 if you have another level 4 on the board with your level 2 tuner. And then Alvain is a level 2 tuner. Again, this just plays for the Accel Synchro Stardust Dragon. If this is properly fusion summoned, you can just bring them back and use him as a tuner. Yeah, that's really it for these two. There's nothing more to say about that. So we're going to move on to the side deck. For the side deck, we're going to start with 3 copies of Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood. Now, I don't know how it is for everybody else's locals, but Ghost Sister is necessary at my locals because there's someone there that does actually slow play. And so Spooky Dogwood is actually necessary for him, but Spooky Dogwood is just also really good because every time your opponent special summons a monster, you gain life points equal to that monster's attack. So if your opponent doesn't want to give you just a bajillion life points, they will stop their turn. This did come up once. I got it on the Dragoon player. He summoned out a Red Eyes and then summoned out Dragoon, and I just had like 5,000 extra life points. Because after Dragoon, he decided he didn't want to keep playing. Well, of course, because Red Eyes Fusion stopped him, but just overall, just really good card. Like I said, it's good against slow players. It's just really good to hopefully stop your opponent from just blasting off with their turn. But yeah, and then also if you go into game 3, this can also give you the edge. If you're going second on the game 3, you can just do that, have some extra life points, and then hopefully you just win by time. So yeah. I also run 2 Lightning Storm and 1 Harpy's Feather Duster. This is mainly for back row decks like Runic and Labyrinth. Lightning Storm, of course, because we can use that to pop attack position monsters. But mainly this is for back row hate, like Labyrinth and Runic. So I, of course, run 3 Dark Ruler No More. So the big issue with this deck is that it can play through a good amount of disruption, but it can't play through everything. And a lot of decks do set up a bunch of stuff. So stuff like Kashtira and all that, where they can just keep negating and not negating, they can keep banishing and banishing and banishing. And yes, to an extent, we want our monsters to be banished, but after a point, it gets annoying. So Dark Ruler, mainly just to help us set up a board. That way we can actually continue the duel and we don't lose turn 1. This did not come up this past week, but I do know that this card does come in handy for this deck. Like I said, it can play through a good amount of disruption, but it can't play through a bunch. Runic Naturia game 2 actually managed to block me out from actually playing at all on turn 1, and I had a really good hand because they set up Beast. They had a bunch of Runic cards in hand, and it just, even with, I didn't draw Dark Ruler that turn, but if I did, I would have been able to play. So, and then of course, the classic staple everybody is running right now, 3 Book of Eclipse. This is mainly the Kashtira go-to card right now, especially if they have a Rise Heart or Shangri-La on the board. We just activate this, and all the cards on the board get flipped face down, and unfortunately, it can be Ash, so a lot of people are actually starting to think running Lunar Eclipse or even Book of Moon is better than this. Thankfully, I have yet to be Ashed on this, but if I do, that could be devastating. So, but yeah, just very good card. It can also be just good against things other than Kashtira. I've used this a couple of times against the Drytron player. So yeah, and then the last card in the side deck is the best board breaker in the game, evenly matched. Some reason it's just very satisfying watching your opponent go first, popping off. You have this in hand, and then it goes to your turn, you draw, and all you say is battle phase, and their face just diminishes. I did activate this several times this past week, just being able to, I've actually didn't do it at all on my first turn, but just a very strong card. Just being able to activate this, your opponent gets rid of every card on the board except 1, and all those cards get banished face down. It was very satisfying to see against the Kashtira player, especially because Kashtiras, yes, they like being banished, but they don't like being banished face down. So it was very nice to just see that go down. All right, so I'm going to do something that I haven't done in any of my deck profile videos yet. Hopefully I'm going to do them again in the future, and that's going to be like a test hand. Goaty does very well going first. In fact, it's primarily a go first deck, but the issue is that Goaty doesn't do a lot on its own turn. It plays primarily on its opponent's turn, setting up the tuners, that way they can be brought back on your opponent's turn, synchro summon on your opponent's turn, banish stuff on your opponent's turn, etc, etc. But so like it doesn't do a lot on its first turn. However, I still want to show a test hand to see what we could possibly do. This is of course going to assume our opponent has no disruption in their hand. They have no hand traps or any sort of negation whatsoever in their hand. So let's just give it a go. So we of course got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So right out the gate, we of course have some pretty good protection for the next turn, but we don't have a lot for our own turn. So right out the gate, I would of course activate Duskwalker's effect, probably discarding Schiff in this instance, so that way Schiff is already in the grave, so we can activate its effect later on. But Duskwalker would summon itself out, and we would summon Supay along with it. We of course would then synchro summon into a level 6 monster to hopefully get things moving. We would go Orion Post here. Orion Post effect would then activate. We can banish a level 6 or lower fish from our deck, and we would of course we're not going to set up Snopios in this instance, so we would banish Paces for that tuner, and then I would activate Shift's effect from grave. He banishes himself for cost and targets for cost 1 fish in the field, and gives it 500 extra attack. So Orion Post would be 26, doesn't matter, it's turn 1. But there we go, we already have 2 of our we already got the 2 tuners banished that come back in the next standby phase. With that, we would of course be sitting on Ash Blossom and Droll, and then we would end our turn there. In our opponent's standby, say he goes into draw phase, we would summon out or in draw phase, then he moves to standby, we would summon out Paces and Schiff because they got banished last turn. And like I said, we're sitting on a Droll and an Ash, and then if our opponent tries to do something, say they summon out a really important monster, we would go synchro into a level 8 fish, because the tuners lock you, they're only allowed to synchro into a level 8 fish with their quick effects. If it's your turn and you're just regular synchro summoning, then yes, you can do level 8s, normal level 8s, but it has to be a level 8 fish. So we would of course go into Ascan. Ascan would be Chainlink 1, and then Orion Post would be Chainlink 2. When Orion Post is used as a synchro summon material, you can banish a fish from your graveyard, and then add to your hand from your deck 1 fish with the same or lower level, but a different name. So in this instance, we would banish out Orion Post himself, and we would search out Snopios. That way we have the quick effect set up. So we are sitting on a Snopios. Then Ascan would banish our opponent's important monster and himself. Ascan would activate, banishing Schiff to resummon himself. Our opponent tries to do anything else, we would go Paces effect to synchro into a level 10 fish, which would be, of course, our big monster. So this, at this point, would banish everything on the board. But he would come back in my next standby phase. So let's say our opponent just kind of ends there, nothing on their board, only maybe a card or 2 in their hand. In the next standby, we would bring back Go to Deep Beyond and Schiff. So unfortunately, Go to Deep Beyond would only have 500 attack points. However, we have Schiff on board, and we would be drawing into a Droll, unfortunately. Well, we would have shuffled at that point, but overall, very strong board, or very strong to be setting up. We of course can then go Shade of the Goatee. We could go Snopios effect, banishing Ascan and Paces to summon himself. Then we can go into a level 8, which would be most likely our Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon. This is if he has anything on board. So Excel Synchro Stardust Dragon, his effect would bring Schiff back. We'd go Schiff, or we'd activate him to bring out the regular Stardust Dragon, and then we would synchro summon into a level 10, most likely either Satellite Warrior or Barone. Let's just assume we go Barone just kind of for the protection. We would go Schiff's effect, giving Go to Deep Beyond an extra 500 attack, and we would, but then because it's another banish, he would have an extra 1,000 attack, so he's 1,500, and then Barone would be 3k. Yeah, not the best board I have set up by any means, but this was a test hand. Sometimes, you know, we don't get the best board we possibly want, but yeah, that is Goatee. Like I said, I topped first place with this past locals, went against some very strong decks, had some very tough matchups. But yeah, I want to thank you all for coming out and watching my deck profile. Let me know in the comments down below what you think, and let me know if what other decks you want to see a deck profile of. And with that, I'll see you all in the next one. See ya!